innocuous grain sack. For generations, we have been told tales of the past, often through the lens of grand empires, epic battles, and the sweeping pronouncements of kings. We learn of dates and names, treaties and conquests, and in doing so, we often forget the most vital, most resonant truth. History is not just a ledger of events, but a tapestry woven from the countless, intimate lives of ordinary people. And sometimes, the most profound stories are found not in the annals of power, but in the quiet, desperate decisions made in the face of unimaginable terror. Imagine, for a moment, that it is the year 1349. You are not a scholar, a soldier, or a noble. You are simply 14. Your name perhaps is Ilara, or Thomas, or any of the simple common names that echoed through the muddy lanes and thatched cottages of medieval England. You live in a village, nestled amongst rolling hills, its rhythm dictated by the sun, the seasons, and the ancient tolling of the church bell. Your world is small, bounded by the familiar fields, the whispering woods, and the faces of your family and neighbors, faces you've known since the day you were born. This world, however, is about to be shattered, not by the clash of steel, nor the roar of a distant army, but by something unseen, insidious, and utterly merciless. A shadow, creeping silently from the east, carried on the very breath of the wind, on the fur of a rat, on the bite of a flea. A shadow that would come to be known, with a shudder, as the Black Death. For us, in our world of vaccines and antibiotics, of global travel and instant information, the very concept of a plague that could wipe out a third, a half, or even more of a continent's population feels like a dark fantasy. But for you, in 1349, it is a stark, brutal reality. You wake, perhaps, to the low, rasping cough of your father. He is a strong man, hardened by years of tilling the soil, his hands calloused, his back stooped from labor. But this cough is different. It sounds wet, rattling, as if his very lungs are filling with something vile. A chill runs through your small frame, colder than the morning air that seeps through the cracks in the wattle and daub walls. You've seen sickness before, the fevers, the winter coughs, but this feels heavier. A premonition, a tightening in your gut that whispers of something far more sinister. The village healer, old Agnes, her face a road map of wrinkles, her eyes sharp despite her years, is called. She clucks her tongue, her brow furrowed with a worry you've never seen. She presses cool cloths to your father's forehead, brews herbal concoctions, mutters prayers in a low, fervent voice. But the fever doesn't break. Instead, it climbs, burning him from within. Then, the first telltale sign, a swelling, dark and angry, erupting in his armpit. A bubo. The word, whispered by Agnes, hangs in the air like a death knell. You've heard the rumors, of course, tales carried on the wind from distant ports of a pestilence that turns men black, that kills with terrifying swiftness. But rumors are abstract. This is your father, his labored breathing filling the small cottage, the smell of sickness a bitter tang in the air. What do? There are no doctors in your village, no hospitals, no antibiotics. There is only Agnes, her limited knowledge, and the desperate hope of prayer. Do you stay by his side, comforting him, tending to his needs, knowing that every touch, every shared breath could be a bridge for the unseen enemy to cross? Or do you flee, a primal urge for self-preservation tearing at your heart, abandoning the man who taught you to sow and to reap, to hunt and to gather? This is not a theoretical question in 1349. This is the very essence of your existence. Let us consider the options, the brutal calculus of survival in a world utterly unequipped to combat such a foe. The choice of isolation. Some families, witnessing the rapid decline of a loved one, made the agonizing decision to isolate. Imagine a young woman, perhaps slightly older than you, seeing her mother succumb. She might, in a desperate act of self-preservation, seal herself and her younger siblings inside their home, blocking up windows and doors, attempting to create an impermeable barrier against the invisible killer. They would live on stored provisions, perhaps with a small, trusted neighbor leaving food at their doorstep. Every cough from within, every creak of the floorboards would be amplified into a symphony of fear. The silence from outside, once comforting, would become a chilling reminder of the emptying village. This was a gamble, a desperate roll of the dice. Some might survive, emerging weeks later into a ghost town haunted by the quiet echoes of those who did not. Others would find the plague had already breached their fragile defenses, creeping through a crack in the wall, or carried in on a seemingly.
Consider the harrowing journey of a family from a small English hamlet, hearing that the plague had reached the nearest market town. They packed their few possessions onto a worn cart, their faces grim with a fear that transcended tears. The father, a burly man, walked silently beside the cart, his hand gripping a crude staff. The mother, pale and watchful, clutched her youngest child. The older children, like you, would walk too, their legs aching, their eyes darting nervously at every shadow. They might encounter other refugees, their faces etched with the same terror, their stories a chilling confirmation of the horrors they were fleeing. They might find roads blocked by suspicious villagers, armed with pitchforks and axes, desperate to prevent the pestilence from entering their own untouched community. Survival became a brutal lottery, dependent on luck, on resilience, and on the terrifying choices made in a vacuum of information and hope. The choice of faith. In a world steeped in religious belief, where the line between the sacred and the profane was thin, many saw the plague as divine punishment, a scourge sent by God to chastise a sinful humanity. The church, for centuries the bedrock of community life, became both a refuge and, tragically, a major vector for the disease. People flocked to churches, desperate for solace, for prayers, for confession, for a miracle. Imagine the scene, the scent of incense mingling with the pervasive odor of sickness, the low murmur of prayers punctuated by hacking coughs. The sight of a beloved priest, his face pale and sweating, delivering a sermon on repentance, knowing full well he might be next to fall. For you, as a 14-year-old, perhaps raised on tales of saints and miracles, the church might offer a desperate hope. You might spend hours kneeling, your hands clasped tightly, your lips moving in fervent prayer, begging for salvation for your family, for your village. You might witness processions of flagellants, self-mortifying penitents, whipping themselves in the streets, believing that their suffering would appease God's wrath. This was a desperate, visceral response to an incomprehensible horror, an attempt to impose meaning on chaos. And for some, it offered a profound, if ultimately futile, sense of control in a world that had spiraled utterly beyond their understanding. The choice of practicality. Even amidst the terror, there were those who attempted practical measures, often based on flawed, nascent understandings of disease. Some believed in the power of strong smells to ward off the miasma, the corrupted air thought to carry the plague. You might see villagers burning aromatic herbs, rosemary, lavender, or juniper in their homes, the acrid smoke filling the air. Doctors, such as they were, might wear grotesque beaked masks filled with sweet-smelling herbs, believing this would filter out the noxious air. You might be told to carry a pomander, a ball of fragrant substances close to your nose. Imagine a scene in your village. A neighbor, driven by a fierce, practical will to survive, begins to dig a deep pit in their garden, far from the well, burning refuse and waste. They might try to enforce a rudimentary quarantine, isolating anyone who showed symptoms. These were desperate, often ineffective measures, but they represented a human refusal to surrender entirely to the inevitable. They were attempts to reclaim a sliver of agency in a world where agency had been brutally stripped away. The horror of the aftermath. The sheer scale of death was unimaginable. Funeral rites, so vital to medieval society, broke down under the strain. There simply weren't enough healthy hands to dig graves, to prepare bodies, to perform the rituals. Mass graves became common, vast pits where bodies were piled indiscriminately, sometimes just covered with a thin layer of earth. The sight of these pits, the smell that emanated from them, would become a haunting memory, etched into the very fabric of the survivor's soul. Imagine you survived. You're Ilara, now 15, standing in your village. The silence is profound, broken only by the chirping of birds, now eerily loud in the absence of human chatter. The fields, once vibrant with crops, are overgrown. The cattle, unmilked and unfed, roam wild or lie dead in their pastures. The homes, once filled with laughter and life, stand empty, their doors ajar, whispering of lives abruptly ended. The air, though no longer thick with the stench of death, carries a phantom chill, a ghost of the terror that swept through. Your family is gone. Your friends are gone. The familiar faces that populated your world have vanished, swallowed by the plague. You are alone, or perhaps with a handful of other survivors, equally shock-shelled and bewildered. What do you do now? The structures of society have fractured. The feudal lords, the priests, the merchants, many are dead. The intricate web of relationships that defined your world has been torn apart. This is where the true resilience of the human spirit emerges. The survivors, the remnant, as some might have called them, were faced with an unprecedented challenge: to rebuild not just their homes, but their entire world from the ashes of a cataclysm. Rebirth from ruin. The Black Death, for all its horror, was also a profound catalyst for change. With so many dead, labor became incredibly valuable. For the first time, serfs and peasants had leverage. They could demand higher wages, better conditions, or even abandon their old lands for new opportunities. The rigid social hierarchy, which had defined medieval life for centuries, began to crack. Imagine Thomas, the young man who might have been your contemporary, now 16. Walking through the abandoned fields, he sees opportunity where before there was only servitude. The land, once belonging to a lord who is now dead, lies fallow. He and others like him begin to claim it, to work it for themselves. They form new communities based on necessity and shared survival, rather than inherited status.
The plague also spurred advancements in medicine, though slowly. The sheer scale of death forced people to question old remedies, to observe the disease more closely, to seek new understandings. It planted the seeds of skepticism, of a more empirical approach to the world that would slowly, over centuries, blossom into the scientific revolution. The very concept of time and death shifted. Life became more precarious, more precious. The fleeting nature of existence was laid bare. This led to a flourishing of art and literature that grappled with themes of mortality, of the fragility of life, and the omnipresent shadow of death. Think of the grim, powerful imagery of the Dens Macabre, where death leads all social classes, kings and beggars, peasants and popes, in a skeletal dance, a stark reminder that no one was immune. The Black Death, in its terrifying sweep, fundamentally altered the course of human history. It broke old systems, forced new ways of thinking, and, in a strange, brutal twist of fate, created opportunities for those who survived.
It reshaped the economy, reconfigured social structures, and even in its own horrifying way, laid some of the groundwork for the modern world. So when we look back at the year 1349, and we imagine you, a 14-year-old, on the cusp of an unimaginable horror, we are not just witnessing a moment of unparalleled suffering. We are witnessing the raw, unvarnished truth of human resilience. We are seeing the profound capacity for adaptation, for desperate courage, for the enduring spark of hope, even in the face of absolute devastation. Your story, the story of Alara or Thomas, or any of the countless forgotten individuals who lived and died through those dark years, is not just a tale of despair. It is a testament to the fundamental human desire to survive, to rebuild, and to find meaning even in the deepest shadows. It reminds us that history is not a distant, dusty chronicle, but a living, breathing testament to the enduring human spirit, capable of both immense vulnerability and astonishing strength. And in understanding their struggles, we gain a deeper appreciation for the world we inhabit today, and the fragile, precious gift of life itself.